Everybody, how are you? How are you today? It's been a while before I've done a video. I just wanted to reach out to you today because yesterday I was thinking about how beautiful, how powerful we are, how amazing we are, how magnetic we are. We are the magnetic child. I know I am. And I'm not saying I'm the only one, but I know I am. I don't know about you guys because we're in a different society than half a century ago. Half a century ago, everyone was amazing. They were just coming up. And if you look at the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you had the lovable, sensual 60s, you had the soulful 70s, and then you had the best of the 80s. Now, those generations that were born into those generations, they've seen a lot of change. They've seen amazing change. They've seen all new things come to fruition. Most of them never even seen diseases out. We heard about plagues and we had vaccines for certain plagues, but we weren't so privy to diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure. Um, we didn't have mental disorders to the epidemic it is today. We had something called ADD, but we didn't have the ADHD, or any type of autism. We didn't have any of that. Now, our parents grew up um, with this president that came out, President Nixon. And I remember my parents, and I've seen it on video as well, war on cancer. Now, we didn't have cancer to the abundance that it is today. And it is something that I wouldn't mind speaking about, but I'm not going to focus on it on the video. I just know that my generation, or anybody that was born between the 50s and the 80s, they didn't see these things in their youth, but they saw it as they aged and got older. Now, if you look at the people who were born around the 70s, the soulful 70s, before that were the sensual 60s. Now, the sensual 60s, there was a little bit of love, there was sex, there was all this stuff. And sex was in abundance. Sex wasn't something that was on the topic of the table like it is nowadays. We got indoctrinated into it and conditioned into it, slowly but surely. In the 1950s, they had a dating manual. In the 1960s, they had the Woodstock. In the 1970s, everybody started to come to fruition, whatever it is that was a mix of the energies, because we're a spiritual being, energetic being. And I guess the sensual 60s and the soulful 70s created the best of the 80s. There was a lot of us. And if you look at the people from my generation that looked up to the people who were doing music, entertainment, TV, all of them were very powerful souls, very, very powerful souls. And so were we. But we were indoctrinated into a society that told us that we weren't supposed to be that artist or that um, musician or that performer. They held that to a secluded group. And you can see throughout the history of singing, entertainment, that the people who, like, the Lenny Kravitz, for instance. I'm sorry, I'm just picking you, Lenny, but his mother was one of the actresses on the Jeffersons. So every generation was kept in the same kind of environment. Most of those people, like for instance, Lenny did not go into acting; he went into the singing. But he had the stepping stones, and he had the guides and people around him to influence it. But you have that with so many of the actors and actresses. I think every single one, to be honest with you. You look back at their generations, all of their generations go back to the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and then the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. All of those are one big family. just like the big family that you have in the government. You know, so you can see that my generation saw all these things, but we weren't privy to that information. We didn't know about it. We're surprised about it now when we hear it. So you can see that there is a group that was selected to walk in that path. And then there was a group like us selected to walk in our paths. My path was just to walk around the entire world. So I've gotten to 68 countries. So uh, my path was to walk in the entire world. And I believe to see the truth because when I was a little kid, I always thought I was a mutant. I always thought that I was a superhero. We have that imagination, and once that starts getting going, oh, forget it. Child has a powerful imagination. Thank goodness I was not brought up in the environment now to imagine that I am opposite sex or I can identify as something else because imagination was pure. It was pure essence, pure wonder, pure love and honesty from the inside of a child. It wasn't influenced by anybody. But we were being influenced, don't get me wrong. Because sex wasn't, like I said, it was not on the table. When I got older, we had someone like Dr. Ruth Westheimer, and Dr. Ruth Westheimer would come on TV at a certain time, and then she would belittle the mothers and fathers and start getting to do funky things during their sexcapades. And we, I remember also when we were moving to Long Island. Well, I can't say I remember it, but I remember my mother telling me a story. We moved to Long Island. Of course, I was older when she told me. And the person that she bought the house from was a swinger. And I didn't know what that was until I got to Europe, and I was just like, "Oh, is that what that means? Oh, okay." Because sex was everywhere. But in Europe, they were more of the idea of sex and rape and pillaging because it wasn't well known in America except for the Native Americans, the ones we used to call Indians. And what they did in all the continents. So they raped and pillaged back then. Of course, I'm sure they still do these things now, but like I said, sex wasn't on the table. Most of us were naive to it. Even I was naive to it. I was way older before I understood it. But I did understand as I got older that it was something new that was introduced to society somewhere between the mid 50s 60s. It was out there in public, with the war of Vietnam and Woodstock and all of this. And the 70s became the soul 70s, and there people were doing it behind the door, a little prudish. I didn't know that across the water is totally different. It's a normal thing to do. Cheat on another person or be with another person. So I don't want to focus too much on it, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. There's something inside of us called discernment, and you can feel things and see things. And this is how powerful we are, how beautiful we are. We can sit there and we could fine tune it, even if you don't have an outer guide or a teacher or decent parents, role models. You are your own guide. You're the only one that can take you to the promised land. Mentally, spiritually. You know, you're the only one that could open this heart and clear this mind. The world has been so deceptive, and the system has been so deceptive to us in the last half a century that a lot of people didn't even notice it because we've been indoctrinated to work hard, strive, worship the money, find a job, permanent job, one job that we can do, even though we're multitaskers. We're a person that can do anything and everything as long as we put our minds and hearts to it, our energy to it. I've been able to do anything and everything that everyone else can do. I've done surgery on myself. I was able to be a website designer for myself. I was able to be a businessman for myself. I was able to be a lawyer for myself. I was able to be an entertainer in so many ways, musician, sports, athlete. And in the 68 countries, mainly was I in entertainment. That's why I know so much about the system, and what it entails. And I've spoke about it before. For you that don't know, you can go to earlier videos, but the system is education, economics, entertainment, labor law, religion, politics, sex, war, and counter war. So these are the things that we are being bombarded with and attacked 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And it's time to change all of that. We've worshipped too many square gods, and we spoke about the square gods: radio, newspaper, telephone, computer, all of those, beepers, you name it. We worshipped them for the longest time. My generation was able to see all of it come into fruition because we didn't really have computers. We heard about them when we were young. We didn't see them come into fruition until we were about like 30, maybe somewhere around that age. Um, no, maybe in our 20s, 20, mid 20s. So we saw that come into fruition. We saw that all around the world now there was this big, huge bubble of Big Brother trying to assemble so much information, but we thought it was just in America for Americans, and Europe for Europeans, and Asia for Asians, and so forth for every continent. But there's a global conspiracy. Every government is one government, just like all people are one people. We are all from one race, human race. But we don't see that because our continents are different with their rules and regulations, and they like to play that color war about white, red, black, brown, yellow, which is nonsense because you can see all human beings are alike. They just have a different shade of skin, maybe some different features, but we're all one family. If we were going to say we're two families, they're male and female, but now they have this gender war thing, which I really just don't understand because at birth it dictates what you are, what organ you have down there. That right there tells you if you're one side or the other, male or female, or whatever you want to call it, masculine, feminine. Of course, like I said in the beginning, our imagination is really important, really powerful. But now these adults are having these imaginations. And that's where I start to see that, okay, they're not working from that power of wonder. Maybe there's something off. But if you want to imagine that you're a tree, great. You imagine you're a tree. Do I want to push that everyone could be a tree? No, I don't want to push it in your face that everyone could be a tree. Me, I identify as a human being, and I've always identified as a masculine because that's the way things were conditioned into me. And I still feel that. I've never had loving parents where I, had to understand where love comes from. I had to understand where love comes from me. Everything opposite of what they gave me was something I didn't want, and I saw that opposite of that is love. Because my parents were not kind, and for about 16 years, I had to take care of my family and protect them from a dangerous man called my father. And as they aged, they didn't get the same abuse as I had. I'm sure, they got a little bit, they got smacked around a little bit, but not as much as I did. Because I remember coming back maybe 30 years later, and the next door neighbor comes to me and she gives me a big hug. And she says, "Oh my God, I never thought you were going to make it." And then I started to think, what do you mean? On my own in Europe when I was in the military? She says, "No, no, no. I never thought you were going to make it the way your father used to beat you." And whew, that made me think how powerful we are. Because I knew I from little, and I've had dreams also, of the past before I was in this world. I remember being a fetus. And I remember my mom getting knocked around, and something inside of me was like, oh shit, I have to take care of this person, and I got to make sure that she's okay. Because I didn't have brothers and sisters back then. So I did. And then when I wound up getting the brothers and sisters, I protected them at all costs. Uh, they never had to come and defend me, and they never ever had my back for anything. Even after uh, I stepped into the world, they never had my back for anything. And that was when I started to learn that immediate family is not your family. Because once I was cast out to the world, I found out the human family is my family. And it's how beautiful this human family can be, especially on 68 countries. When you realize that people can be so caring and so loving, yeah, you throw over your shoulder the people that you were born with, the blood brothers and sisters, what we call them. Because, that negative environment is irrelevant for you, especially when you're a soulful soul. I've always walked in good character. My whole life I walked in good character. Even when I was young and I was getting beaten, I always walked in this powerful character because I knew that the next day would be all right. So I never worried about um, getting beat the next day, because I thought, the way I was conditioned and believing, and oh, God will take care of everything. Oh, it'll be the next day. It'll be beautiful because I was a kid. I didn't understand all of that. When I started getting older and I became 16, I started to realize, before that, maybe 7. But 7 through 16, I realized, okay, I got to defend myself. There is a God, but they're not going to come and fix this situation. There's a reason why this is all happening to me. And I knew that back then because my aunt used to say nothing happens in coincidence. There's always a reason for why it happens. So I started to think as a little child, why would my father be kicking my butt all the time? Why would my mother be turning a blind eye? Why would my siblings be walking away? Oh, they all feared this man, and I was the only one that could stand up to this man. I guess that's what made me become a Marine and know that I could defend this country and know I could defend anyone and know I could travel anywhere and still be okay and fine on my own. You don't really need to stick around negative environments unless you're conditioned to it. Once you could break that condition, you could just walk away. And some people do. I mean, my mother got fed up after a while and said, I'm not going to take this anymore, and divorced my father finally. But I was 16, so it took 16 years of beatings before I could understand all that. And once I got to Europe and started traveling, because that was my main base, I started playing baseball then and traveling to all these countries. I started to see the beauty of people, especially me being in a higher stature where I'm making money and I have a shelter and I have transportation and I have it all on my own. People were surprised that I can come from a different country and have it on my own and in all these different countries. My family were very jealous of that. Till this day, my brothers and sisters are very jealous of that. They can't understand how a divine being like me was chosen by God, to be so powerful and so strong. But my path was to let you know that, yeah, you're that powerful, you're that strong. But none of us really get the chance to get out of our environment. We're coaxed into education, economics, entertainment, labor, law, religion, politics, sex, war, counter war, and we get distracted. I didn't get too distracted because, for instance, when you're young, once sex comes in, your mind it gets twisted. You start thinking about this person for the longest time, and then as soon as you're with somebody and you change energies or share energies, now you start thinking about that other person. And your energy goes in that direction. I didn't have to do that till I was like far in my 20s because I was naive to it. But I was when I got to realize that, hey, if I waited to my 20s and then now I understand it so much more than the other people who started in their teens, that's like that drug addiction. Like, oh, I need more, I need more, I need more. I didn't need that. I just didn't need that. It was nice, it was great, but it wasn't something that I focused on because I was focusing on playing sports. I've always wanted to be a professional ball player. So I got a chance to sign here in the States, had an injury, couldn't play anymore, went to Europe, wound up getting it back. So I said, hey, I'm going to stick with it. It doesn't matter who falls in love with me. Baseball is one I fall in love with. So I took that and I went. And I got to know everyone around me. And every time I went into a different environment, a different country, I saw everyone as my brother, my sister, my father, my mother, my uncle, my aunt, my grandmother, my grandfather, my cousins, you name it, niece, nephew. But I didn't see them as my divine counterpart, who I was supposed to marry. I didn't want to ruin that relationship because we're all brothers and sisters. And once you connect like that, you can see where that goes. And then after a while, you can see if you're made for each other or fit for each other. But you're not forced in your mind to believe that this person is the one for you. That one is the one for you. Way up in there, past the clouds, left, right, north, south, east, west. It's all around heaven, and the divine spirit. There's a toroidal field within us, and when we are happy and we are loving, it just emanates and it goes all over the place. It's like a mother and a child, and both together. When that love comes down from the mother inside that child, inside that fetus, now that toroidal field is twice as strong, and it just emulates, and people could feel that. It goes north, south, east, west, as above, as below, inside, outside, and we have all that beauty. Um, just want you to know that all those answers are within you. You don't have to sit there and ask anyone. You don't need anyone to verify or validate anything. That this gut feeling, this sixth sense, this intuition, this innate intelligence knows and feels. Um, but they keep you from it. Half a decade later, I'm really understanding and seeing that I've never had a bad wish for anyone. I never wished my brothers and sisters bad or my mother and father bad or ill will. But something happened when I didn't do that. And all the bad things that they did to me seem to come back. They call it karma, but it's just the way life is. Whatever you put out, you get 10 times fold. And they've always put out negative vibrations, vicious vibrations, horrible vibrations, negative vibrations. Some people are just mean like that, and you can see the things that counter them. Right now, my parents, one had passed away, the other one is blind in one eye. I have brothers that are sick. I have a sister that keeps her stories from her children, and it's sad to see that it's coming back to them because you don't wish bad on another. You just don't. I don't. But I see, and it still pains me that people still get that karma. But hey, if you're not walking in that fine line of goodness that's inside of you, that good character, the one that has compassion, the one that is an empathic person, the one that is caring, then yes, you're gonna pull in negative vibrations. Because, like I said, you're the magnetic child. Why do you think all these beautiful things just kept coming to me? It's because no matter what I do, I give gratitude even for the horrible things that happen because there's a lesson to be learned. That's what I've learned. There's no mistakes. There's always a lesson to be learned. And if you don't learn that lesson, you're forced to repeat yourself. That's just obvious. History repeats itself. Sorry for all the background noise, but I'm in the garden today. I just wanted to reach out. Um, I see the videos coming to the end, so I'm going to do a part two. Right now, I'm just going to click off and click back on and get back to speaking about that divine being, that spirit that we have within us. Um, so I'll be right back for part two. Love you guys.